Hello, I'm Liz, one of Derry's reference librarians, and welcome to another episode of Misinformation Busters. Once a week, we tackle a rumor or false/misunderstood information, and we try to separate fact from fiction. This week, we're talking about a hashtag that we've been seeing a lot of lately, the Save Our Children hashtag. So, what's the story? This past summer, we saw the hashtag #SaveTheChildren trend a lot on social media, and not because of the century-old humanitarian organization. It was supposedly a part of a movement to end child trafficking or raise awareness. But it was using peculiar rhetoric, stuff along the lines of the Black Lives Matter movement is a distraction from the real issue of child trafficking, or why is the media not reporting the 800,000 children that go missing every year? Or forget COVID, child trafficking is the real pandemic. It was almost as if that those sharing the Save the Children hashtag felt that the mainstream media had been covering up child trafficking, despite the fact that it's been a topic of specials and TV movies for years. Turns out, this hashtag was a more palatable form of entry to the QAnon conspiracy, a conspiracy born in 2017 that posits that the world is controlled by satanic child abusers and child eaters, and that the current president is the only one to take them down. Oh, and the cabal happens to be made up of everyone the current president does not like. Obviously, there's no evidence supporting this, but since then, the hashtag really hasn't gone away. It's changed as the Save the Children charity actually distanced themselves from the hashtag, and the hashtag has now become Save Our Children. And despite the 4chan conspiracy origins of this hashtag, those who share it say that they are actually helping raise awareness of child trafficking. So, what are the facts? Well, first off, a lot of this will likely sound familiar since we covered a lot of this during the Trafficking Panic episode. However, the QAnon conspiracy and this hashtag has persisted, so it's time to revisit it. Does the Save Our Children hashtag, or QAnon overall, actually save children? In short, no. If we're actually looking at numbers, the prosecution for child traffickers has actually fallen since 2017, but to be fair, there are a lot of factors at play for prosecutions, and as we'll learn, sometimes numbers don't tell the whole story. A bigger tell is actually how child welfare and anti-trafficking organizations are responding to this hashtag. Polaris, the group that runs the National Human Trafficking Hotline, issued a number of statements against Q-related conspiracies. The first one was denouncing the Wayfair trafficking conspiracy, stating that misinformation like that actually hindered the organization from helping victims. The second was a Q&A on Save Our Children, in which they made it very clear that they are not affiliated, nor do they really support the hashtag. I mean, I wouldn't want to be associated with modern-day blood libel either. KidSafe, a child welfare organization, issued a more full-throated denouncement stating, quote, QAnon promoters are parasites. To grow their footprint, gain credibility, and spread misinformation, they associate their message of hate and bigotry with well-known, well-regarded organizations, specifically those working to end child sexual abuse and trafficking. That strategy threatens to diminish our identities, tarnish our reputations, and harm our good works. Just as education is the most powerful means we have to prevent child sex abuse and trafficking, education will be our most powerful weapon against the threat QAnon presents. All of us working in the field must join together to speak out loudly. And the organization, World Without Exploitation, went even further, condemning not only Save Our Children and QAnon, but Operation Underground Railroad, the one anti-trafficking organization that has really been jumping on that conspiracy bandwagon. Interesting note, Operation Underground Railroad is currently under criminal investigation in Utah by Davis County Attorney General Troy Rawlings. And before that, they were criticized for taking credit for arrests that they actually had no involvement in. Overall, the main issue that organizations seem to have with Save Our Children is that they make the job of fighting trafficking harder through spreading misinformation, bad data, and just misrepresenting trafficking. Remember that 800,000 children go missing number? That number is from a 2002 conspiracy that has parents if they reported their children as runaways. Not only is it an outdated number, but it's not even really the right subject. The FBI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children are sources for far more credible numbers, and they estimate that about 4,021, 394 kids are reported missing for 2019. And most of those were reported as runaways, not kidnappings, and thankfully, most of them were returned home. If you're raising awareness using the wrong data, you're actually distorting the reality of the problem. Michael Hobbs, the host of the You're Wrong About podcast, and actually you should listen to the episode on human trafficking, says that the biggest issue is the misperception of what trafficking is. And not only with the Save Our Children crowd, but that applies to the general population. As he puts it, most people have a taken view of trafficking. Basically, you're walking around, minding your own business. Suddenly you're thrown in a van, taken to another country and sold to the highest bidder. Or you turn your head for a second and your child is stolen from the parking lot and you never see them again. That is not the reality of trafficking. That's just stranger danger. The most likely victim of child trafficking isn't an 8-year-old stolen from their front yard. It's a teen runaway or a teen who lives in an unsupportive home environment who meets someone who presents themselves as a friend and then exploits them. Kind of like how the most likely person to kidnap your kid isn't a creep in a van, it's an ex-spouse, but we're always told to be scared of strangers, particularly ones in vans, so that becomes what we look for. Hobbs also notes that a lot of things fall under the label of trafficking. People are trafficked for labor, for instance, and look, if someone under 18 willingly trades sex for a place to stay or for money, that does fall under trafficking. As Hobbs puts it, quote, "A homeless runaway having sex with some sleazeball in exchange for a warm bed is a tragedy, but it's less salacious than the taken myth that trafficking memes circulating on social media imply. It's also far more common. If anything, the issue of trafficking is complicated, from what falls under it to how people fall into it, and simplifying it or sensationalizing it doesn't help." Journalist Sarah Marshall, another host of the You're Wrong About podcast, says this, and she actually sums it up pretty well. Quote, "People don't know the circumstances of the study, they just know the percentage. It indicates a real problem in the world, but then it gets inflated into this idea of a crisis. We have these numbers that, if we looked at them, would indicate the complexity of the real problems that generate them. But we instead, I think, choose to selectively interpret them to support the idea that this is a very dangerous world in which children just need to be rescued from monsters rather than have their daily lives improved in a way that involves listening to them. You don't have to listen to someone when you're rescuing them." And it looks like that's pretty much the best way to combat a real problem is listen to people who have been there and listen to experts rather than just sharing a hashtag that said experts have been distancing themselves from. On October 21st, a number of anti-trafficking organizations released an open letter condemning Save Our Children QAnon, stating, quote, "Anybody, political committee, public office holder, candidate, or media outlet who lends any credibility to QAnon conspiracies related to human trafficking actively harms the fight against human trafficking." And then they went on to state things that could actually help combat human trafficking. Things like better data collection, the end of discriminatory practices against immigrants and people of color, better social and legal support for vulnerable youths, actual informational, legal, and societal changes. Meanwhile, many of those who share the Save Our Children hashtag are usually spotted online yelling about dolls, Netflix calling Tom Hanks or anyone who questions them a child abuser, or most recently saying Chrissy Teigen is a child abuser and therefore deserved to lose her pregnancy. I wish I was kidding. Next time you see a story about her on social media, go look at the Facebook comments. And you might ask why I look at Facebook comments, but, well, where else am I going to find topics for these videos? But I digress. If you are passionate about this issue or just want to learn more, think twice before sharing this hashtag and refer to an actual advocacy group or activists that are doing groundwork. And if you see someone else share it, do not immediately assume the worst. Plenty of people are still not aware of the conspiracy origins of this or the fact that anti-trafficking organizations have pretty much disavowed this hashtag. Just point them to the letter and other statements from these organizations and kind of say, hey, if you want to help, these are the people to go to. As I said the last time, there is a way to help, and getting caught up in a moral panic is not the answer. This hashtag isn't about stopping anything, it's just about sowing outrage. And moral panics don't want to solve a problem. They want a witch hunt, a scapegoat, a villain. Instead, listen to the people who actually want to solve the problem. Thank you for watching, and as always, look for the sources in the comments. And if you want to do some research, you can use our EBSCO databases available through our website, and I'll see you next week.